The fluorescent lights of the St. Jude's Pediatric ER were harsh, stripping the color from my skin and blurring the edges of the room. Every minute felt like an hour. Every cough from my 5-year-old son, Malik, was a hammer blow against my chest. He was pale, too quiet, and his small forehead radiated heat that I knew instinctively was wrong. This wasn't just a cold. This was danger. I had waited 3 hours, 3 long, sterile hours, watching nurses rush past us, their eyes grazing over me, settling on the clipboard, and then moving on. We were just another statistical entry in the overcrowded waiting room, another black mother with an anxious face and a sick child. Finally, they called his name. We were ushered into a small examination room. Malik was shivering, even under the thin white sheet they provided. I gently rubbed his back, murmuring promises I hoped I could keep. When the door opened, Dr. Sterling walked in. He was exactly what you picture when you think of the hospital hierarchy. Crisp white coat, silver hair perfectly combed, the faint smell of expensive cologne masking the antiseptic air. He didn't look at me first. He looked at the chart. He sighed. A slight, almost imperceptible sound of professional annoyance. Malik Lathan, 5 years old, fever and persistent cough. He read, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. I leaned forward, trying to convey the urgency in my voice. Doctor, his fever spiked to 104.5 degrees this morning. It's been oscillating, and he's not responding to the acetaminophen we usually use. He also complained of severe abdominal pain last night, which is unusual for him. Dr. Sterling didn't lift his gaze from the chart. He scribbled something quickly. Mother, fevers spike. That's what they do, he stated, as if teaching me basic biology. Did you ensure the Tylenol was properly administered? Sometimes dosage measurements can be challenging. The heat in the room suddenly intensified. But it wasn't the fever. It was me. I gripped the edge of the chair, forcing my voice to remain calm, professional. I reminded myself who I was and who he thought I was. The difference was a shield. I am aware of proper pediatric dosing, doctor. I noted the non-response. Also, the cough sounds deep, almost rattling. I am concerned about a lower respiratory infection. I would feel significantly better if a rapid strep and a comprehensive blood panel were run immediately, perhaps even a chest X-ray, given the difficulty breathing. He finally looked up, and when he looked at me, I saw it, the flash of dismissive judgment that transcended simple impatience. It was the assessment of class, of race, of assumed ignorance. He saw a hysterical black woman demanding expensive, unnecessary tests simply because she read something alarming on the internet. He smiled thinly, the kind of smile that says, I tolerate you, but I do not respect you. Mrs. Lathan, he said, drawing out the name with patronizing slowness. Let's keep our diagnoses simple, shall we? I'm the physician here. You're the mother. I appreciate your anxiety. Truly I do, but we see dozens of seasonal viruses every day. We don't flood the labs with non-essential panels just because a child has a high temperature. He pulled out his stethoscope, conducting the briefest, most cursory examination of Malik's chest. 2 quick presses. Done. Malik whimpered softly. He sounds congested. Standard viral infection. Nothing acute, Dr. Sterling concluded, pulling his coat tighter, as if the contact with us might be contagious. We'll send him home with a course of rest, hydration, and instructions to alternate ibuprofen and acetaminophen. The abdominal pain is likely just irritation from the virus. Diet adjustment will help. He started walking toward the door. The examination had lasted less than 90 seconds. I pushed myself to my feet. My blood was vibrating with a dangerous mix of fear for my son and righteous fury over the disrespect. Dr. Sterling, you did not even check his throat properly. You haven't looked at his hydration levels. He hasn't eaten anything substantial in 24 hours. I told you, this fever is resistant. He is lethargic. You are being negligent. He stopped, his hand resting on the metal door handle. His patience was visibly gone. He looked back at me, his face hardening into the wall of medical authority. Look, Mrs. Lathan, I understand the anxiety. It's draining being a parent, especially when resources are tight. But this is the emergency room. We reserve comprehensive diagnostics for actual emergencies. Your child is stable. He needs rest, not a battery of tests that will cost the hospital thousands. Trust my judgment. He paused, leaning closer, lowering his voice to deliver the final, calculated insult. Perhaps you should take a deep breath yourself. Sometimes the mother's stress exacerbates the child's symptoms. He picks up on your hysteria. Get him home, give him water, and relax. He was effectively telling me I was the problem, that my intuition, my professional assessment, and my maternal fear were irrelevant noise, the result of over-dramatization, typical of my demographic. He tried to open the door, signaling the end of the conversation. Malik coughed again, a dry, ragged sound that echoed the emptiness of the doctor's assurances. I looked down at my son, then back at the doctor's smug, dismissive face. I felt the familiar weight of the world I moved in, the constant necessity of proving my worth, even in a crisis. The time for being just a mother was over. I reached into my handbag, not for my insurance card, but for the personalized ID badge I rarely carried, the one laminated with the St. Jude's official seal and my face next to the title. I held it up, letting the polished surface catch the harsh ER light. Dr. Sterling's gaze followed the movement of my hand. His professional facade wavered slightly as he read the silver lettering beneath my name. Aisha Lathan, Chair of the St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital, Ethics and Funding Review Board. A look of utter confusion replaced his condescension. I am not hysterical, doctor, I said, my voice low and dangerously controlled. I am demanding the standard of care for my child that I ensure this hospital delivers to every patient. I placed the badge back in my bag, pulling out my phone instead. My thumb hovered over a contact labeled Elias, Hospital CEO. Now, before I call the chief executive and discuss with him exactly why you denied comprehensive care to a feverish, dehydrated 5-year-old in violation of hospital protocol, I paused, letting him absorb the cold reality of his immediate future. Run the labs. Immediately. And doctor, when you return, we will discuss your assumptions about what constitutes tight resources in my family and how those assumptions will affect your contract renewal. Dr. Sterling swallowed hard. The smugness had evaporated, replaced by stark, wide-eyed panic. He didn't move toward the door. He moved toward the internal phone on the wall, his hands shaking slightly as he picked up the receiver. Get pediatrics rapid response in room 3 immediately. He barked into the phone. The change in tone absolute. Full blood panel, CBC, rapid diagnostics, chest X-ray, now. He hung up, turning back to me, his posture now completely submissive. Mrs. Lathan, Chairwoman Lathan, I deeply apologize. I misunderstood the situation entirely. Please allow me to rectify this. I didn't answer him. I simply returned to my son's side, stroking his forehead, ignoring the disgraced doctor completely. I watched Malik, praying the intervention wasn't too late. The injustice had been served. Now the debt was due. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that this doctor was just the beginning of a larger cleanup I needed to initiate at St. Jude's. I closed my eyes briefly, remembering the quiet promise I made years ago. Never again would I allow assumption to be mistaken for fact. I opened my eyes, ready for the inevitable showdown. The tests would confirm my fears, and the power structure would finally shift. Malik would be safe, and Dr. Sterling would learn the true cost of casual cruelty. He finished scribbling on the electronic chart without ever once looking into my face. He looked everywhere but at me. He looked at the floor, at the wall clock, at the door handle. He was looking for any exit that would remove him from the irritation I represented. The examination was over. It had taken 3 minutes and 42 seconds. "It's a common virus, Miss Johnson," he declared, his voice flat, professional, and utterly devoid of care. He made the diagnosis sound like a judgment against me, as if my anxiety, my desperation, was the real illness in the room. "You mothers tend to overreact when they spike a fever," he continued, delivering the words like a universal truth he was forced to endure daily. The way he used the word mothers made it sound like a deficit, a hysterical condition, endemic to our gender, perhaps only to our color. I bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. I had spent 15 years perfecting the art of maintaining perfect composure when I was being deliberately undervalued. I knew that composure was my only shield now. I wasn't just fighting for respect in this moment. I was fighting for Elijah's ability to breathe without pain. "Dr. Sterling," I started, trying to keep my voice even, measured, the way I spoke when addressing the quarterly budget review. "Respectfully, the lethargy is extreme. He hasn't acknowledged sound in an hour. His lips are faintly blue." I pushed Elijah's sweat-soaked hair back from his forehead, holding him tight. "I need blood work," I insisted. "A respiratory panel. Something to rule out an infection deeper than a mild cold." He finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, almost bored. "Miss Johnson," he sighed, the long breath dripping with manufactured patience. "We don't run every expensive test the moment a parent rushes in with a cold. We have protocols here." "I understand protocols, doctor," I replied, my voice tightening despite my efforts. "But I know my child. This is not a common cold." He pulled out the clipboard again, tapping the pen against the plastic surface. "If every parent insisted on a full panel for a common virus," he droned on, "we would bankrupt the hospital system. We must prioritize resources. I am prescribing an antipyretic and a decongestant. Go home. He will be fine." He emphasized, "Go home." It was a command disguised as medical advice, a dismissal wrapped in a prescription slip. He was dismissing the physical evidence of Elijah's struggle because he had already dismissed the messenger. I stared at the slip of paper he pushed across the stainless steel examination table. It felt like an insult to my intelligence, a dismissal of my maternal instinct. "We are not leaving," I said, my voice dropping to a low, firm tone that usually quieted entire boardrooms. "Not until you do a chest X-ray and a basic metabolic panel." Dr. Sterling laughed. It was a small, dry, hateful sound that scraped against my nerves. "You don't get to dictate hospital policy, Miss Johnson," he smirked. "I am the attending physician here. Your refusal to accept the diagnosis is noted, but ultimately irrelevant. The hospital needs this room. You are delaying care for truly sick patients." The hypocrisy was suffocating. Truly sick patients. Was Elijah's silent, struggling body not enough? I felt the deep, familiar burn behind my eyes that signals humiliation. This was it. The moment where they try to reduce you to nothing but the label they've assigned you. But just as the doctor started toward the door, muttering a demand for the nurse to prep the next room, Elijah stirred against my chest. It wasn't a cough. It wasn't a cry. It was a sharp, rapid intake of air. A tiny audible rasp that sounded too wet, too shallow, and too fast, like a cloth tearing suddenly. My world stopped rotating. Everything went silent, except the frantic pounding in my ears. Elijah's eyes, which had been loosely closed, fluttered open. They didn't focus on me. They just looked vacant, staring up at the harsh fluorescent light above us. Then, his small body went entirely slack in my arms. The immediate crisis was real. It was no longer a disagreement over symptoms. It was life or death happening right here, right now. Elijah, I whispered, leaning my head down to check his breathing. The sound was ragged, uneven. He was fighting. Dr. Sterling, his back still partially turned toward us, seemed annoyed by the interruption. Look, if he's going to be dramatic, he began, turning back with a petulant expression. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the panic finally break through my careful composure. I wasn't crying. I was moving. Instinct took over, the primal, deep need to protect my child overriding every societal constraint. I placed my hand firmly on Elijah's chest, feeling the frantic, shallow rhythm of his lungs working too hard. The doctor started to approach, his expression shifting finally from disdain to confusion, maybe even a sliver of alarm. "What's happening?" he asked, suddenly professional, suddenly worried about liability. I looked at him then. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. All the fear and frustration crystallized into a cold, hard determination. I reached for the large worn handbag hanging on the back of the chair. My hand went deep inside the main compartment. I wasn't reaching for my phone to call another doctor or another hospital. I was reaching for the folder, the one with the official hospital seal. "You wanted to talk about prioritizing hospital resources, Dr. Sterling?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You wanted to talk about who dictates policy?" He took a tentative step back, sensing the fundamental shift in the atmosphere. The subservient, anxious black mother was gone. Someone else was sitting there now. I pulled out the folder. It was thick and heavy, bound in dark blue leather. I laid it down carefully on the cold table, next to the prescription slip he had written. "The patient in your care is now in acute respiratory distress," I stated, reciting the facts clinically, "and you have dismissed him twice in the last 20 minutes. I opened the folder just enough for him to see the title page, stamped with the seal of the Metropolitan Hospital Ethics and Oversight Committee. His eyes fell upon the page. I saw the moment his jaw tightened. The blood drained from his face, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. He saw my name printed beneath the title, Lena Johnson, Chairwoman. He had just tried to shame the woman who controlled the budget for his entire department. He had just neglected the child of the person who ultimately decided if his hospital retained its accreditation. The time for discussion was over. The time for action had begun. I closed the folder sharply. "This is no longer a medical consultation, doctor," I said, rising slowly, Elijah heavy but safe in my arms. "It's a formal investigation." The cold plastic chair dug into my thighs. I stared at the faint green line flickering across Leo's monitoring screen. Dr. Thorne's dismissal still burned hotter than the fever radiating from my son's skin. He hadn't seen a child in distress. He had seen a demographic he was conditioned to ignore, a problem to be quickly minimized and shuffled away. "Viruses run their course," he had scoffed. "If you stopped Googling symptoms, maybe you'd calm down." My hand, gripping the safety rail of the bed, trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the immense effort of control. Every instinct screamed at me to explode, to reveal the truth, demand the finest specialists, and make this man understand the magnitude of his error. But I couldn't. Not yet. Leo needed silence. He needed low light and steady air. He needed my absolute calm, even as the walls of the observation room felt like they were closing in. My first priority was Leo's immediate safety. My second, far colder priority was justice. And justice required precision. I had been underestimated my entire life. I had learned early that power is not about the noise you make, but the silence you command when the time is right. I watched the nurse, A kind woman named Maria gently adjusted the IV drip. She avoided looking at me, but her brow was furrowed with genuine concern. She knew Leo was sicker than Dr. Thorne had stated. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, authoritative whisper that had nothing to do with motherhood and everything to do with C-suite negotiations. Maria, I said, I need you to tell me exactly what the initial labs showed. The full panel, no abbreviations. She flinched, clearly uncomfortable with bypassing the lead physician, but something in my gaze stopped her from refusing. She hesitated only for a moment before clicking the charts open on the wall monitor. His white count is significantly elevated, she murmured, tracing the screen with a hesitant finger. And his C-reactive protein is high. It points heavily to a severe bacterial or atypical infection, not just the flu. She looked up at me, fear clouding her eyes. Dr. Thorne said we needed to wait another 6 hours before ordering the specialized cultures. Protocol. Protocol. The shield of the lazy and the excuse of the indifferent. 6 hours was 6 hours too long when an infection was racing through a small body. 6 hours could change everything. I felt a dizzying wave of self-reproach. Why hadn't I insisted on driving straight to Boston Children's? Why had I chosen this prestigious institution, believing their glossy reputation meant quality care for everyone? Because I wanted Leo to see that even here, even in the suburbs, black mothers deserved to be heard. I had walked into that examining room wanting respect. Instead, I got arrogance and dismissal. "Thank you, Maria," I said, my voice steady again. "Please make sure he stays completely stable. Do not leave the floor. If anything at all changes, you call the attending specialist on duty, regardless of what Dr. Thorne ordered." I didn't ask her if she could do this. I told her what she would do. She nodded quickly, recognizing the shift in dynamic, recognizing the steel beneath the worry. I slipped my phone out of my pocket. It was heavy, weighted with contacts that could redraw the organizational chart of this entire institution within a week. I scrolled past my emergency list, my personal physician, my lawyer, my husband, and stopped on a name I rarely had to use outside of quarterly review meetings. Anthony M. Rourke, General Counsel, Ethics and Compliance. This was no longer a personal matter of insult. This was an institutional failure of medical ethics and care equity. This was exactly what the committee I chaired was designed to prevent. I walked toward the window, turning my back to Leo so he couldn't see the determination harden my face. The hospital grounds below were pristine, manicured, and utterly silent under the late afternoon sun. I pressed the call button. Rourke picked up on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional. "Sarah, I wasn't expecting your number today. Is everything all right?" "No, Anthony," I whispered, keeping my tone measured, clinical. "Nothing is all right. I am currently in the pediatric emergency observation unit at St. Jude's. My son, Leo, is ill." "I am so sorry to hear that. I will send flowers immediately. Do you need me to expedite any administrative paperwork for insurance?" "I need you to listen carefully." I cut him off, my voice dropping lower, emphasizing every word. "I need you to initiate an immediate and comprehensive investigation into the conduct of Dr. Elijah Thorne, attending pediatrician, concerning a refusal to follow standard diagnostic protocol on a patient presenting with symptoms of acute systemic infection." The line went silent. Anthony Rourke was a man who understood the language of liability better than anyone I knew. "Sarah," he finally said, his tone shifting from friendly associate to corporate operative, "are you filing this complaint as a private citizen, or are you instructing this investigation in your capacity as the chair of the Institutional Ethics Board?" The distinction was crucial. As a private citizen, the investigation might take months and be buried by bureaucracy. As chair, it was a directive, a non-negotiable command that superseded department heads. I looked back at Leo, whose breathing was shallow and fast. I thought of Dr. Thorne, standing over us, looking down his nose as if my pain was just noise. "Anthony," I said, a dangerous calm coating my words, "you will draft the formal notice of investigation tonight. You will secure all internal security footage, transcribed audio from the triage desk, and the complete electronic health record log associated with patient Leo Johnson, starting from the moment we entered the building." I paused, allowing the weight of my position to sink into the silence. "This is not a complaint, Anthony," I finished. "This is a directive from the board chair, and I expect Dr. Thorne's professional review file, dating back 5 years, on my desk by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning." The tension in the air was palpable, even through the fiber optic lines connecting us. Rourke knew what I knew: a failure to properly diagnose a child, when compounded by documented negligence and dismissal of the parent's concerns, was career suicide, especially when the parent held the keys to the kingdom. "Understood, Chairwoman," Rourke confirmed, his voice now devoid of any personal warmth, fully professional. "The investigation is formally initiated. I will have our compliance team mobilize immediately. Is there anything else I need to know about the internal circumstances?" I closed my eyes briefly, picturing Thorne's condescending smile. "Yes," I said. "He dismissed my concerns because he assumed I was uneducated, emotional, and low priority. He violated the most fundamental principle of medicine: listening to the patient's family." "Noted," Rourke responded. "We will ensure a highly specialized consulting physician is assigned to Leo Johnson immediately, overriding Dr. Thorne's original orders." "Ensure that happens," I instructed. "And Anthony, do not let Dr. Thorne or anyone in his department know who I am. I want this investigation conducted in absolute silence until I give the final order for review." The groundwork was laid. The wheels of institutional justice were turning, silent and invisible. I hung up the phone. The emotional storm had subsided, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. My son was still fighting the illness, but I had just started a fight against the institution that had failed him, and this was a fight I knew exactly how to win. I put the phone away and walked back to Leo's bedside, ready to shift back from CEO to mother, awaiting the arrival of the specialist I had just indirectly demanded. But the waiting was the hardest part. The waiting, and the knowledge that the man responsible for the delay was still walking the halls, oblivious to the fact that his career was already over. The clock on the sterile wall felt like a drum. Each second was a hammer blow against my chest. Leo was worse, much worse. The shallow coughs he had when we arrived were now heavy, wet sounds that rattled in his small body. His skin, already dark, had taken on an ashiness that terrified me. The fever spike was immediate and dangerous. I pressed the call button again and again. I didn't ask for Dr. Alaric. I asked for any attending physician. I asked for the nurse manager. I asked for anyone who understood the weight of a child's rapidly failing respiratory system. A young intern finally rushed in, looking panicked. She glanced at the monitor, her eyes widening at the numbers. "His saturation levels are dropping," she whispered, grabbing a crash cart nearby. "I need to page Dr. Alaric immediately." Before she could finish the emergency communication, he walked back in. Not rushing, strolling. He held a coffee mug and looked thoroughly annoyed that his quiet break had been interrupted. He saw the panicked intern, the spiking monitor, and the fear etched on my face. He didn't apologize. He didn't rush to my son. He sighed dramatically. The sound was designed to belittle us both. "Dr. Jones," he said to the intern, his voice dripping with condescension, "I told the mother that this is just a standard viral response. This aggressive intervention is unnecessary. You are alarming the patient and yourself." The intern stammered, holding the oxygen mask uncertainly. She clearly knew the situation was serious, but Dr. Alaric's authority crushed her doubt. I moved closer to Leo, shielding him instinctively. Dr. Alaric, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He is struggling for air. You see the numbers. You hear the wheezing. This isn't a virus. This is critical. You are risking his life because you refuse to listen to a black woman who knows her own child. He finally focused his eyes on me. They were cold, flat, and devoid of professional concern. They held only disdain. Mrs. He paused, checking the chart with deliberate slowness. Montgomery, if you insist on escalating a standard childhood illness to a crisis, perhaps this hospital is not the right fit for your over-anxious parenting style. I can sign the discharge papers now, and you can seek treatment elsewhere if you feel your child is being neglected. It was the final line, the definitive rejection, the assertion that my anxiety, my race, and my status were the only things dictating my request, not my child's life. In that moment, the raw, searing panic cooled. It didn't disappear, but it transmuted into something hard and sharp. It became calculated fury. I looked at Leo's small, frightened face. I saw my father, 20 years ago, turned away from the emergency room after a stroke because the staff insisted he was merely intoxicated. I saw the long, agonizing history of black pain dismissed as exaggeration, hysteria, or manipulation. I had spent my entire career building institutional safeguards against this very ignorance. I sat on committees dedicated to diversity, equity, and ethical patient care. I had raised millions for this hospital system, specifically to train staff to avoid bias in urgent diagnosis. I hadn't just gotten here by chance. I had earned the right to demand respect for my child's life. Dr. Alaric leaned in slightly, smugly, waiting for me to concede, to sign the papers, and retreat in humiliation. The moment you check out, your insurance will be billed for all services rendered, of course, he added, a parting shot designed to remind me of the perceived financial burden I represented. I took a deep breath. My hands, which had been trembling, steadied. I am not going anywhere, I stated clearly, and Leo is not going anywhere until he is stabilized. But you are absolutely correct, doctor. He raised an eyebrow, surprised I seemed to be agreeing with him. I have wasted enough time appealing to your professional responsibility, I continued, my voice now smooth, quiet, and utterly calm. I will now appeal to the institutional structure that governs your employment. He smirked. Oh, security is certainly an institutional structure, Mrs. Montgomery. Are you threatening me? I looked straight past him, addressing the terrified intern who was still hovering near the door. Dr. Jones, please tell Dr. Alaric that I need the current hospital internal administrative directory brought to this room immediately, I requested. The one with the colored tabs. Specifically, the list detailing the contact information for the Ethics and Oversight Committee members. Dr. Alaric laughed, a short, dry, mocking sound. The administrative directory? What in the world for, Mrs. Montgomery? Are you going to write a stern letter on behalf of the Parents' Advisory Council? I ignored him entirely. My eyes remained fixed on the intern, waiting for her reaction. Dr. Jones looked confused, then uncertain, then frightened. She knew retrieving that specific document was far outside the purview of a standard patient request. That directory was only handled by senior management, finance, or board affiliates. The intern hesitated, looking from Dr. Alaric's demanding face to my own. My face, unlike his, held no demand, only expectation. Quiet, immutable expectation. I need it now, Dr. Jones, I pressed gently. And please ask the clerk at the main desk to bring a secured hospital laptop. I need to check my institutional email access. It's been a while since I used this terminal. Dr. Alaric's laugh died in his throat. His face finally changed. The disdain was replaced by a flicker of confusion. quickly followed by a cold, investigative fear. He stepped closer, his demeanor shifting instantly from arrogant physician to wary subordinate. Mrs. Montgomery, what exactly is your relationship with the hospital's administrative structure? He demanded, suspicion heavy in his tone. Are you perhaps a staff member I don't recognize? I didn't answer him. I pulled my phone out of my purse. I unlocked it and navigated to a secured messaging app. I didn't call my husband. I didn't call a lawyer. I sent a single text message to a number labeled simply Chief of Staff. The message read, Urgent. Medical neglect situation in pediatrics room 403. Require immediate on-site intervention regarding attending physician. Confirming my status, E. Montgomery, board seat 7. Initiating official inquiry now. I placed the phone screen up on the small table next to Leo's bed. Then I looked at Dr. Alaric. The game had just changed. The humiliation was over. The accountability was about to begin. The tubes ran silently beside Leo's bed. The rhythmic beep of the monitor was a cruel lullaby. I sat there, watching the rise and fall of his small chest. The crisis had passed, thanks to the quick work of the nurses and the resident I had quietly terrified into action. But the anger had not passed. It had crystallized. It was no longer the hot, blinding rage of a desperate mother. It was the cold, steady focus of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Dr. Sterling was still walking these halls. He was still giving orders. He was still deciding who was worthy of attention and who was merely an annoyance. I had been an annoyance. Leo had been a statistic. I slipped out of the room, pulling the door shut softly. My shoes made no sound on the polished tile floor. I found an unused consultation room, small and windowless. I needed privacy for what came next. I took out my burner phone, the one used only for sensitive communications, that needed to stay outside the hospital's official records. I called Denise. Denise managed my life. She knew how to mobilize armies faster than most generals. Denise, I kept my voice low, gravelly. I need an immediate board meeting scheduled. Naomi, it's 11 p.m. Nothing is open. The Ethics Review Committee, emergency session, first thing tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. sharp. Denise was silent for a moment. She knew the tone. She knew this was not a suggestion. What is the topic, ma'am? I need a formal agenda item. I looked down at my hands. They were still trembling slightly from the stress, but they would sign the papers just fine. The agenda is the immediate suspension and review of Dr. Richard Sterling, effective immediately. The neurosurgeon, the one with the multi-million-dollar grant proposal. Denise finally sounded worried. She knew the implications of touching a star doctor. He will be there. I will summon him personally. Make sure the notification is sent through standard channels, marked Urgent Quality Review Inquiry. I paused. Do not mention my involvement to anyone outside the core team. He must believe this is routine administrative oversight. Denise confirmed the details. I hung up. The weight of the hospital system pressed down on the quiet consultation room. I was asking for a nuclear option against a powerful target, but Leo's shallow breathing played back in my mind. It was justified. I walked back towards the pediatric wing. As I rounded the corner by the main nursing station, I saw him. Dr. Sterling, still in his scrubs, talking loudly to a younger resident, shaking his head with an air of superiority. He noticed me. He straightened slightly, a flash of defensive irritation crossing his features. He walked over, his confidence overwhelming. He still didn't recognize me. Not really, just the face of the woman he had dismissed. Mrs. Johnson, is it? Your son is stable. You need to relax. The nurses have everything handled. His voice was patronizing, designed to soothe a hysterical mind, not reassure a worried one. I folded my arms across my chest. My suit jacket was long gone. I was just a tired mother in a simple cotton shirt. Dr. Sterling, I met his eyes. Mine were clear and unwavering. He seemed surprised that I wasn't weeping or thanking him profusely. I trust you followed through on the treatment plan outlined by the pediatric staff? The one you questioned earlier? I asked. He bristled instantly. The veneer of polite professionalism cracked. Mrs. Johnson, I am a senior physician here. I have 40 years of experience. I do not question the care plan. I optimize it. There was no systemic failure, merely a routine elevation of symptoms that you, understandably, exaggerated. He used understandably like a knife wrapped in silk. It implied my fear was driven by ignorance, perhaps a lack of exposure to real medical emergencies. You dismissed my concerns for over an hour, doctor. You told me it was just a common virus. He waved a dismissive hand. We triage, Mrs. Johnson. That's what we do. We cannot allocate specialized resources based on every minor parental anxiety. The system would collapse. He took a step closer, lowering his voice slightly as if sharing a profound medical secret. This is a world-class facility. We treat everyone the same. I assure you, your son received the exact level of care warranted by his condition, irrespective of... He stopped himself just short of saying race or class, but the implication hung heavy and foul in the sterile air. I smiled, a slow predatory tightening of the lips. I look forward to discussing your resource allocation policies tomorrow morning, doctor. He frowned, confused by my sudden professional jargon. I don't know what you mean. I have grand rounds scheduled. Cancel them, I instructed, my voice flat. You have a mandatory inquiry scheduled for 8 a.m. in the East Wing boardroom, Ethics Review Committee. He looked startled, then scoffed. An ethics review? Is this about the residency program structure? That's far above your pay grade, madam. You should focus on your son. I did not flinch. I let him maintain his assumption that I was simply a distraught woman making empty threats. The inquiry is about you, doctor, and your adherence to the Hippocratic Oath. He laughed, a short, sharp burst of arrogant sound. They're reviewing me because one nervous mother complained? Highly irregular, but fine. I'll clear it up in 10 minutes. My record speaks for itself. It does, I confirmed. It really, truly does. I walked past him, leaving him standing there, convinced he had just shut down a minor annoyance. He had no idea the earthquake he was standing on. I walked straight to the nurse's station and requested the full incident report detailing Leo's delayed triage. I wanted the time-stamped records. I wanted the witness statements. I wanted everything bound and ready. I knew Dr. Sterling was relying on his reputation and his grants to protect him. He was untouchable. But I was the chair of the committee that reviewed those grants. I was the head of the ethics board that oversaw physician conduct. I was the financial linchpin that kept the cardiology and neurosurgery departments solvent. He saw a black mother, panicked and poor. He was about to see the woman who controlled his entire career. I settled back down by Leo's side. He slept peacefully. I pulled the blanket up higher around his neck. I checked my watch. 7 hours until the emergency meeting. 7 hours until Dr. Sterling learned that the system he had weaponized against the vulnerable could be swiftly and justly reversed. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I ran through the meeting procedures, the bylaws, and the necessary votes. I needed to ensure this was airtight. His dismissal had to be immediate, public, and legally irreversible. It wasn't just for Leo. It was for every parent who had been silenced, every voice that had been ignored, simply because of how they looked or where they came from. Justice was coming to this hospital, and it would arrive exactly at 8 a.m. The pediatric trauma team swarmed Alara. They worked with the speed I had prayed for an hour earlier. No more arguments, no more arrogance, just focused action. Dr. Thorne, the great gatekeeper, was useless now. He stood paralyzed by the doorframe, a study in panic and fading authority. He watched the chaos he had caused. Respiratory syncytial virus. Advanced stage, the chief resident stated to the charge nurse. Should have been treated hours ago. Hours ago. The words ripped through me. Those hours were stolen by contempt. They were stolen by his assumption of my ignorance. They wheeled Ilara out toward the pediatric ICU. I stepped away from the gurney, letting the medical urgency flow around me. The fear was now channeled. It became sharp, professional focus. I turned back to Dr. Thorne. He stumbled forward, trying to salvage something. Mrs. Madam Chair, I truly apologize. I didn't connect the names. The stress of the ER. He was grasping for any anchor. Silence, doctor, I commanded. My voice was level, almost impossibly calm. It was the voice I used when addressing a difficult board majority. We are going to the administrative wing, right now. His eyes darted. He looked for a way out, a different corridor, a distraction. I lifted my hand, showing him the name on my cell phone screen, the CEO of the hospital, ringing on silent vibrate. I advise you not to make me call him from this location, Dr. Thorne. He immediately dropped his gaze and began to follow me, shoulders slumped, a white coat of shame trailing behind him. We walked the immense, silent distance toward the executive elevators. He mumbled excuses, patient volume, budget cuts, miscommunication. He was talking to the floor, talking to the expensive tiles. I didn't answer. I was no longer a mother seeking validation. I was the sword of oversight. I was thinking of the countless others, the black mothers who left this emergency room with only a cheap bottle of cough syrup and the searing sting of dismissal, the ones who had no voice higher than their own desperate plea. I was walking for them. We reached the private elevator bay. Access required a special key card. I pressed the card against the reader, and the mechanism clicked open instantly. He watched, astonished, as the door slid open to reveal the rich plush carpeting reserved only for senior administration. I want you to understand the gravity of this situation, doctor, I said, stepping inside. He shuffled in behind me, avoiding my eyes. My presence here today was not simply as a concerned parent checking in on the hospital. He looked confused. He still believed this was merely bad luck, a coincidence that he had insulted the wrong woman. The Ethics and Accountability Board, I continued, pressing the top floor button, authorized a silent, unscheduled audit of emergency department triage protocols this quarter. He gasped, a small dry sound of pure dread. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was systemic exposure. We were particularly concerned about documented discrepancies in the standard of care based on patient demographics and socioeconomic presentation. The elevator moved upward, swift and silent. I fixed him with a direct, uncompromising stare. You, Dr. Thorne, provided the perfect textbook illustration of the exact failure we were investigating. The elevator chimed softly. The doors opened onto the executive suite floor. The CEO, Mr. Harrison, was waiting, alerted by my assistant who had tracked my movements. He looked anxious, already sweating under the perfect fluorescent light. He saw me. Then he saw the beaten physician trailing 2 steps behind me. Mr. Harrison's face tightened instantly. Dr. Thorne, the CEO said, his voice flat with official termination. Please wait outside my office in the lounge. Do not move. Thorne obeyed, silent and stripped of dignity. Mr. Harrison ushered me into the spacious conference room. Amara, I am so deeply sorry, he murmured, forgetting the polished corporate facade. How is Ilara? What did they find? Stable, for now, I answered, sitting down at the massive polished table. And that is the only positive development, Robert. I placed my oversized leather handbag on the table and pulled out a heavy file, meticulously organized. This folder contains the complete documentation of my visit today. It includes video surveillance, requests, nurse statements, my sworn testimony, and confirmation of Ilara's advanced diagnosis. I pushed the file across the table. I was dismissed, disrespected, and my daughter's life was unnecessarily jeopardized because your physician assumed, based on prejudice, that I was either lying or too unintelligent to know when my child was dying. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the cold wood. I came here tonight to review the budgets for the new oncology wing. I will still do that. The hospital needs its funding. My tone hardened, cutting off any attempt at negotiation or delay. But first, we are initiating immediate disciplinary action. Effective immediately, Dr. Thorne is suspended without pay. The CEO hesitated, grasping for procedure. Amara, we need to follow standard HR protocols. Due process. The Ethics Board authorized me to accelerate this process based on clear and documented evidence of gross negligence and discrimination during a sanctioned audit. I cut him off, unwavering. We are not waiting for 3 committee meetings, Robert. The preliminary hearing is tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I stood up, the action deliberate and final. I will be chairing that hearing. Ensure Dr. Thorne is present and that his medical privileges are fully revoked pending the outcome. I had executed the professional strike. The power reversal was complete, but the weight of what happened still pressed on me. My child was fighting for her breath just 3 floors below. I retrieved my bag and looked at the stunned CEO. I am going to the ICU now, Robert. Send all required documentation to my home office by midnight. I walked out, leaving the weight of the hospital's ethical failure squarely on his shoulders. The professional victory felt cold, distant. All I could think about was the sound of my daughter's shallow breathing. The true battle was yet to be won. The emergency room lobby, moments ago a stage for my deepest fear and loudest fury, now felt strangely silent. Guy was stable. He had received the care Sterling refused to give, administered by nurses who acted with the humanity Sterling had lost. I walked away from the sterile lights, but I did not leave the hospital. Not yet. The personal anguish had to be shelved. The mother had to disappear, replaced instantly by the chair. My assistant, Maria, met me discreetly in a private executive office, located far above the chaos of the intake floor. She had already activated the formal protocol. The room was cold, quiet, and dominated by a large mahogany table, ready for the immediate ethics committee meeting. Dr. Sterling had been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. His privileges were suspended. He was shocked, but still defiant. He demanded to speak to the CEO. He demanded to know who authorized this. He did not yet grasp the magnitude of the cliff he had just run off. Maria laid out the files, the formal complaints against him over the past 5 years, instances of dismissed patients, misdiagnoses, and racially coded notes in patient records. Standard operational reviews he had always managed to squash or deflect because his research grants brought in significant funding. "He thinks his publications shield him, Anya," Maria whispered, using my first name, knowing the weight of the moment. "They used to," I confirmed, my voice flat, professional. "Not anymore. Funding is secondary to life and dignity here." I looked at the documentation of my own experience. The incident report detailing his refusal to listen, his dismissive hand gesture, his blatant assumption that I was hysterical, uneducated, and undeserving of his expertise. I was the case study. I was the proof. The committee members filtered in, all senior administrators and respected physicians who understood the absolute need for institutional integrity. They saw my face, tired but resolute. They knew the details. They didn't need convincing. They just needed the process to be followed meticulously and legally. Dr. Sterling was brought in, flanked by the hospital's legal counsel. He entered the room, his white coat crisp, his posture rigid with indignation. He still didn't see me. He saw Anya, the mother, the woman who had caused trouble. Chairwoman Hayes, the general counsel began, referring to me formally. Sterling's head snapped up. The air left the room. His face, usually pale and composed, went ash gray. He recognized the name associated with the largest endowments, the strictest compliance audits, and the relentless drive to eliminate racial disparities in healthcare access. He had called the chairwoman of the Ethics and Oversight Board a liar and an alarmist just 2 hours ago, while her child struggled to breathe. He stammered, Anya Hayes, I apologize. I was not aware of your position." The arrogance was gone, replaced by naked terror. But his apology was not for his actions. It was for his miscalculation of my power. "Your awareness of my position is immaterial to the charges, Dr. Sterling," I stated, my voice measured, steady. I picked up the formal complaint I had signed just minutes before. "We are here to review your professional conduct, specifically regarding the violation of patient protocol and the demonstrable lack of medical impartiality and dignity displayed during the triage of a minor patient, Kai Hayes." I looked directly at him, letting him see the coldness in my eyes. The professional distance was the most brutal weapon I possessed. It showed him I felt nothing personal, only the obligation of justice. He tried to argue. He brought up his tenure, his awards, his service. "It was a busy night," he pleaded, his voice cracking. I misinterpreted the data. It was a lapse in judgment, not malice. We all make mistakes. "Some mistakes," I responded slowly, leaning forward slightly, "are forgivable. Others are foundational to a pattern of professional negligence and discriminatory practice." "You did not misinterpret the data, doctor. You ignored the source. You silenced the advocate. You prioritized your preconceived notions over standard medical inquiry." I recited the policies he violated, paragraph by paragraph. My command of the legal and ethical framework was absolute, far exceeding his understanding of the hospital's charter. The evidence was overwhelming. The video surveillance from the emergency room entrance, showing his dismissive body language. The transcript of his condescending remarks recorded by the nurses' system, and the formal statement from the triage nurse confirming that his refusal to intervene was deliberate. The vote was unanimous. Termination for cause, effective immediately. A full report to the State Medical Board recommending review of his license, citing gross misconduct and systemic bias leading to patient endangerment. When the decision was delivered, Sterling looked like a broken doll. He finally saw the totality of his loss, not just his job, but his legacy, his career, everything he had built on the assumption that he was untouchable. He fixed his gaze on me one last time, a pathetic attempt to elicit mercy. "You are destroying my life over one mistake," he whispered, desperation fouling the air. "No, doctor," I corrected him, signing the final paperwork with a steady hand. "Your life was not destroyed today. It was exposed. You destroyed your career the moment you decided a black mother's anxiety was less valid than a white father's certainty. You destroyed your career when you elevated your prejudice above your oath." I stood up, signaling the meeting was concluded. "The hospital will issue a formal statement tomorrow morning. You will be escorted off the property, and your access credentials are now revoked." I walked out of the room, leaving him sitting there, alone with the legal counsel, grappling with the irreversible consequences of minutes of casual cruelty. The exhaustion finally hit me. The weight of being the mother, the patient, the victim, and the judge had taken its toll. But there was a quiet, profound relief that settled deep within my chest. Justice was procedural, cold and final. It had been delivered, not through rage, but through protocol. I immediately went to Kai's bedside. He was asleep now, breathing evenly. His color was back. I smoothed his hair, careful not to wake him. The hospital was safer now, I knew. Safer for Kai. Safer for every black child whose parents might walk through those doors, demanding respect and medical necessity. But the fight wasn't just about Dr. Sterling. He was a symptom, a visible sickness. The institutional arrogance, the silent bias that allowed men like him to thrive, still needed to be addressed. I sat by Kai's side, feeling the quiet determination hardening my resolve. Sterling was gone, but the deeper work of cleaning the house, of ensuring systemic change, was only just beginning. Tomorrow, I would return to the office, not just as the chair, but as the survivor who understood exactly where the system was broken and how to fix it. The firing was only the beginning of the institutional audit, and I had a list of every administrator who had ever covered for Dr. Sterling and every policy that needed rewriting. I closed my eyes, readying myself for the next phase. The sun would rise soon, and with it, the full reckoning. The silence in the boardroom was no longer confusion. It was dread. Dr. Vance was sweating, wiping his brow with a wrinkled cuff. He knew the data was damning. "These timelines are misleading," he stammered, looking at Mr. Stern, the chair of the hospital board, who avoided his gaze. There were staffing issues that afternoon, high patient volume. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the polished mahogany table. My voice was low, cutting through his excuses like a scalpel. "Dr. Vance," I said, "the triage notes show you spent 20 minutes reviewing a golfing brochure during the period you designated for chart review, while my son, Sam, sat in the waiting room with a fever of 104, gasping for breath." He tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. "We have the time-stamped security footage. We have the internal chat logs, where you referred to my concerns as typical overreaction from those mothers. We have the notes where Nurse Clara explicitly flagged Sam's deteriorating condition to you, and your documented instruction was to let the triage nurse handle it. I have more important cases." His face went pale, the color draining away as if pulled by gravity. He finally looked at me, really looked, seeing not just a grieving mother, but an accuser who had done her homework. "That is slander," he whispered. "I am a respected physician. I have served this hospital for 15 years. "And that is precisely why this is devastating, Doctor," Mr. Stern interjected, his voice heavy with disappointment. "We expect clinical excellence, but more importantly, we demand ethical, equitable care." Vance turned back to me, desperation creeping in. He tried to appeal to my humanity, which he had just hours ago denied to my child. "Look, Mrs. I apologize, truly. I was rushed. It was a bad day. If your son is well now, can we not handle this internally? I will personally oversee his recovery. I'll donate time to the community clinic." He was scrambling for a lifeline, dangling cheap compensation instead of accepting responsibility. It was the moment I had waited for, the moment he realized the sheer scale of his miscalculation. I smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of institutional authority. "Dr. Vance," I said, standing up slowly. I walked to the head of the table, where my portfolio rested. I picked up the heavy, silver-embossed pen that rested on top. "I am Leila Dubois," I stated, my voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "I am not simply Mrs. Dubois, a worried mother you could dismiss with a wave of your hand." I paused, allowing the weight of the name to settle over the boardroom. "I am the newly appointed chair of the Hospital Funding and Ethics Oversight Committee, a position I accepted specifically because of the pervasive, quiet racism and classism that allows doctors like you to decide who deserves prompt, life-saving care and who deserves to wait. The air thickened. Vance looked like a statue carved from ice, his jaw slack. He looked at Mr. Stern, begging with his eyes for confirmation that I was lying. Mr. Stern simply nodded, a slow, solemn confirmation of the truth. The negligence you displayed toward Sam was not merely a lapse in judgment, doctor, I continued, walking toward the windows overlooking the city. It was a symptom of a much deeper ethical failure. I returned to the table, meeting his terrified gaze. Your 15 years of service cannot erase the minutes of negligence that nearly cost my child his life. Those minutes were imbued with assumptions about my means, my education, and my worthiness as a mother. I looked down at the agenda on the table, where the motion had already been prepared. The committee has reviewed the evidence presented. Effective immediately, your privileges are revoked, and your employment with St. Jude's Hospital is terminated for gross negligence and ethical misconduct, in accordance with Section 4, subsections B and C of the physician contract. Vance gasped, a pathetic sound of utter defeat. You can't. I'll sue. I'll fight this. This is personal retribution. It is justice, doctor, I corrected him calmly, and the decision is unanimous. Security will escort you off the premises immediately. Two silent professional guards materialized from the back wall, moving toward Vance. He tried to argue, to plead with Mr. Stern, but Stern simply shook his head, looking away. As the guards gently but firmly guided the ruined physician out of the room, Vance glanced back at me one last time. His eyes held fear, yes, but also a flicker of horrified recognition. He saw the woman he had dismissed, now holding the power to define his entire future. I watched the door close behind them. I finally sank back into my chair, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The silence returned, but this time it was clean. It was the sound of a slate wiped clear. Mr. Stern poured me a glass of water. Layla, that was necessary and brutal. Are you all right? I took the glass, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the exertion of controlled power. I am all right, Mr. Stern, I said, sipping the cool water. Sam is stable. He's going to be fine. But the system that almost let him die? That is not fine. This is just the beginning of the structural changes we need to implement here. My eyes went back to the empty seat where Vance had sat. Firing him was easy. Making sure the next doctor, the next mother, never faced that injustice again, that was the real fight. I gathered my papers, the documents detailing my son's near-death experience. They were evidence, yes, but they were also a permanent reminder of the stakes. I stood up, feeling the weight of the new role settle fully onto my shoulders. We have an emergency session scheduled for tomorrow morning regarding implicit bias training mandates, I reminded Stern. I expect the full board to be present. Stern nodded gravely. Yes, Cher Dubois, absolutely. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving the lingering stench of professional ruin behind me. The hospital halls looked the same, bright, clean, busy. But to me, they felt different. They felt like contested ground, finally secured. As I headed toward Sam's room, I thought about the sheer, exhausting cost of having to fight for basic human dignity. The price of justice was high, but allowing injustice to thrive? That cost was immeasurable. I couldn't wait to see Sam, to hold his small, recovering body. Tomorrow, the work would continue. Tonight, I was just a mother, resting after winning a terrifying battle. A battle no mother should ever have to fight.